I'll be telling you about Kuru. Tracy Helberg. What is Kuru, and what is its causative agent? Let's begin with diagnosis. No laboratory studies are definitive in diagnosing Kuru. They are only used to rule out other causative factors. What about imaging studies? None of those help either. The destructive evidence of the disease is only microscopically viewable post-mortem. What about treatment and clinical care? There is no treatment for Kuru. Palliative care is the only option. What about medications and chemotherapy? Again, there are no medications that evidence efficacy in the treatment of Kuru. So, what is the prognosis? Nobody survives. Kuru is uniformly fatal. So what kind of pathogen are we talking about? The causative agent is not a virus, it's not a bacteria, it's not a fungus or a parasite. It's actually a prion. The abnormal prion in its pathogenic form creates abnormal misfolding of the normal prion protein cells that reside in the brain. Kuru is a transmissible spongiform encephalopathy. This family of diseases is named for the spongy appearance created by holes in the brain. It is sometimes referred to as an epidemic version of the Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. Kuru's most differential characteristic is its method of transmission. Kuru is a degenerative disease in the brain brought forth by the defective malformed protein called the prion. Other related illnesses include Gertzmann-Straussler-Scheinker disease, fatal familiar insomnia, and other prion diseases in animals that you might recognize, such as mad cow disease, and there is also a chronic wasting disease in deer and scapie in goats. These diseases are sometimes referred to as the brain wasting diseases. The prion is the causative agent. Transmission is through ingestion, and incubation can be shockingly long. The pathogenic prion. The diseased prion, the one you see on the left, is an isoform of a normal naturally occurring glycoprotein like the one you see at the lower right. According to an article from Bentham Science Publishers, the crucial event in the development of TSEs is the conformational change of a host-encoded membrane protein into a fibril-forming isoform. If you look on the left, you'll see the diseased prion, and you'll see the folding up of the amino acids. Those are called beta helices. On the bottom right, you see a normal prion with amino acids in a sheet form without the folding over. Normal prions are readily broken down into amino acids or smaller polypeptides by proteases. The resistant malformed misfolded prion, however, is able to multiply and aggregate. The resultant clumping interferes with the protein's typical susceptibility to degradation by appropriate enzymes. The accumulation causes death of brain cells, while masses of misfolded prions take up residence, eat holes into the brain, and transform existing brain cells into further disease. The history of Kuru. It's a very rare disease that was epidemic in the 50s and 60s in the Okapa district of the eastern highlands of Papua New Guinea. The Kuru disease phenomenon initially took place among the 4 linguistic group and at least 9 additional tribal groups closely related geographically, culturally, and through marital connections. Kuru was unknown beyond these tribes until the 1950s, when the area came under administrative control by the Australian government. Actual scientific study on Kuru did not exist until 1957, when the Australian government, having a patrol post in Okapa, became involved with the people of the area. Prior to then, there's no written record of the disease, and our information comes solely from oral history. A particular case of Kuru occurring in 1900 is believed to mark the commencement of an endemic proliferation of the disease, reaching annual death counts of over 200 per year. It is theorized that patient 0 acquired the pathogen as sporadic Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, a nearly identically symptomatic and related disease which, unlike Kuru, may develop spontaneously, and that his immersion into a New Guinea tribal community began the cascade of Kuru incidents on record. How do we honor our dead? It's personal. It's communal. It's second nature to the rituals and traditional ceremonies of our families, our communities, our tribes. Transmission. Honor thy journey and bid a farewell in the old man's sugarcane garden. Heavy burden consumed in the final stillness. Sacred soul, take flight. The 4-morning ceremony involved the ritualistic reabsorption of bodies in an effort to achieve sacred release of the soul from within the burden of its earthbound carriage. Endocannibalism, consuming the familial dead, undertaken to free the soul. Funerary cannibalism is the ritualistic cooking and consuming of body parts practiced by the 4 in love and respect for the spirit of the dead. The ritual. Very little of the body is discarded. Maternal kin dismember the corpse. Hands and feet are removed. Muscles are stripped from within arms and legs. Marrow is sucked out of bone. The skull is fractured, the brain removed. Meat, brain, and viscera consumed. Bob and Shirley Glass are credited with the watershed moment of suggesting transmission of Kuru may be related to cannibalism. Here are some interesting facts about Kuru. It is always fatal and usually within a year of symptomatic status. In the 4 language, kuria means to tremble and shake, which occurs uncontrollably throughout the course of the disease. Also called the laughing disease for its signature symptom. Also referred to as negi-nagi, meaning silly, foolish person, perhaps due to the classic symptoms of inappropriate bursts of laughter, personality change, and the patient's apparent lack of concern over the condition. One of the difficulties in diagnosing Kuru is that the initial symptoms are preceded by classic flu-like symptoms, headache, fever, joint pain, and these are inadequate alerts of the seriousness to come. The first official stage of the Kuru disease is the ambulant stage, wherein there is a disturbance of physical control, posture, and balance, but the patient is still ambulatory. There's an unsteady stance and gait, decreased muscle control, tremors, shaking, and difficulty pronouncing words. The sedentary stage comes next. The main symptom here is ataxia, which is similar to the effects of alcohol, slurred speech, lack of coordination. There's an increasing inability to walk, more tremors, emotional instability, and the classic random pathological outbursts of laughter. There's further loss of bodily control, including spasms, dysphagia, which means it's difficult to swallow, and secondary malnutrition due to the aforementioned. Finally, in the terminal stage of the disease, there is a complete loss of bodily control. There's an inability to swallow, speak, or move. It is a state of being bedridden, starving, incontinent, and unable to speak. Death from Kuru results directly from pneumonia, malnutrition, or infections occurring from ulcerated wounds during the disease. So, is there any good news? Yep, Kuru is preventable. The prohibition of cannibalism by Australian authorities in the 50s caused an abrupt interference with the transmission practices of Kuru. The epidemic declined drastically since 1957, when deaths were at roughly 200 per year. The last death reported was prior to 2010. This illustrates an incubation period ranging 5 to 50 years. Individuals born prior to 1957 were subject to a latent stage up until close to 2010. Kuru is a rare example of a century-contained endemic disease, providing a unique opportunity of study. Incidence and prevalence of Kuru. The first report of the Kuru disease to Western medicine was made in 1957 by D. Carlton Kajusek and Dr. Vin Zigis. 172 villages on record have history of Kuru disease. The Kuru region encompasses an area of 25 by 40 square miles in New Guinea. 145 villages in the Okapa and surrounding region have 2,700 deaths on record. 80% of victims are of the 4 linguistic group. Neighboring groups include the rest of them that are written there. Victims shared cultural, geographic, and marital ties. Initial reports revealed just 3% occurrence in adult males. Women were the predominant consumers of the brain and most likely handed off pieces to the children, while men consumed primarily meat of the muscles. The incidence data supports this profile. While boys above the age of 7 aged out of brain consumption, girls of the same age most certainly increased this burden as they matured. Kuru became the leading cause of death in females of the affected villages, as the disease decimated their children and adult women, but rarely men. In 100 years, occurrences went from 0 back to 0. The phenomenon of Kuru disease opened a window to the deeply held customs of a unique culture which tragically suffered by merely carrying out faithfully the rituals taught for generations. The mortality rates for females posed an existential threat to an entire indigenous population in New Guinea. This very localized disease presented a unique opportunity for investigation of a potentially catastrophic, ultimately preventable, and fortunately virtually eradicated disease. The extensive research of prions and their epidemiological relationship to related conditions, such as mad cow disease, seen in Britain more recent times, will assist us in preparing for the potential risks posed to humans in the future globally. This presentation is dedicated to the women and their families of the Okapa district and their neighboring communities. The 4 live on.